Alright, what is going on, everybody? In case you were just tuning in, there's such a long delay in between when I start streaming to where I can see it. So I had a feeling that nothing was broadcasting, but I guess I was wrong. Alright, William, Randy Henderson, thanks for being in the chat. Glad that you're here. So yeah, this is obviously going to be the next installment of the series, I guess you would say, jump-starting the learning curve. So, you know, we've covered the preface, important literature, first grade, and no place for biddies. And now we're on to jump-starting the learning curve. It's starting to catch up. Is everything coming across okay for you guys? For some reason, it's like a 20-second delay for me, so it's hard for me to know. But yeah, just, you know, shoot me a little message in the chat if it's all working out all right. You guys can hear it okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to give just a quick introduction. I don't have a whole lot of time before my wife gets back with the kids and stuff, so I'm going to try to keep this quick so I can spend some time with them because I'm getting into a busy work week. So for those that have watched my videos and understand the intentions on where I plan on bringing my channel, I plan on expanding to everything treasure related beyond just the Forrest Fenn. Alright, so that's going to include, I'm obviously still going to continue the Forrest Fenn stuff because, you know, that's pretty much the priority treasure hunt. But on top of that, doing metal detecting, thrift store shopping, estate sailing, coin roll hunting, treasure legends state by state, and just stuff like that, you know. And so I plan on changing my channel name. Alright, the original intention was to go with the name Treasure Thoughts, right? Kind of coincides with what I've been doing on here. You know, Forrest Fenn Treasure Thoughts and stuff like that. So that way, you know, if I'm covering Forrest Fenn stuff, it still says Forrest Fenn Treasure Thoughts. If I start to do, you know, state stuff, it could be like Texas Treasure Thoughts or Connecticut Treasure Thoughts. Or Lost Dutchman Mine Treasure Thoughts, you know, stuff like that. But it wouldn't really fit with, you know, the metal detecting and coin roll hunting and stuff like that. You know, so I got to thinking about, you know, what was it? Everything treasure, all things treasure, which, you know, kind of would help with the, you know, the metal detecting, coin roll hunting, and be able to go back and relate to, you know, the Forrest Fenn stuff, the state by state stuff. And then I thought, you know, why not just call it treasure related? But and I kind of want to get a little bit more creative than that, you know, treasure tracker, you know, cache chaser, something like that. So if you guys have any suggestions, right, if you guys could put it down into the comments, you know, because you guys view me from a different perspective, obviously. So if you have a name that kind of, you know, fits the personality and the type of videos and stuff that I make, ultimately I'm going to look at your guys' suggestions and, you know, take that contribution, you know, and apply it to my YouTube channel, right? And then once I change my name, then I can, you know, start making the intros and stuff like that, because, you know, it'd be kind of pointless for it to get done now only for me to change my name. Another thing in addition to that, in order for me to change my YouTube name, I'm gonna have to switch to a brand account through Google. And when I do that, all of my subscribers and likes and whatnot will transfer over with me, but all the comments that were left in those videos apparently get deleted. So that kind of makes me contemplate not wanting to do it. But yeah, so those are some of my thoughts. I figured, you know, between, you know, treasure related or treasure tracker, all things treasure, everything treasure, you know, and treasure thoughts. You know, I figure that those kind of are good, but you guys might be a lot more creative than me. So if anybody has suggestions, you know, putting it into the comments down below once the video comes up or whatever, and I'll scroll back through the live chat. It's just I would have a better chance of seeing them down in the comments. Another thing that I want to say, and then I'll get into starting the video. I'm up to 365 subscribers right now. So that is, you know, I mean, it's not thousands and thousands, but I've gone up 50 subscribers in the last 28 days. And I think that's pretty cool. It's a good achievement. So I think what I'm going to start doing is inside of my little screen here in the viewer is, you know, I'm going to put the amount of subscribers out of what my goal is. You know, we'll focus at, you know, 500 and so on and so forth, and, you know, just keep doing it. That way you guys that have been with my channel since the beginning, you know, when you go back and watch these, you can kind of see how it grew and whatnot. So again, thank you guys for all the support. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this. But again, I appreciate you guys' support, and you know, hopefully you'll stick with me through all these transitions and whatnot. So let me just go through, see who's in the chat right now real quick. We got William, Randy, Anon, how's it going, man? Wooly, and Robert Zelensky. Never seen that name in here, but I don't think so anyways, but welcome. And yeah, so if you guys have anything that you want to stand out to me, just do the @RodneyGreenway in the live chat so it pops out, and then I'll try to answer it. But anyways, jump starting the learning curve. Now if you remember back from my part 3, you know, I had hinted towards an affair, right? And especially like if you go back and watch my 2 videos of secrets in the book, you know, that's where I really that's where I really was explaining why I was coming to that conclusion. And even then, the previous chapter, No Place for Biddies, you know, I could kind of see it in there, or even the first grade, talking about the old lunch bucket woman and whatnot. But jump starting the learning curve, you know, originally that was the chapter that really brought me to that conclusion. But as I said, I started to stray away from that idea, and jump starting the learning curve is the chapter that is now changing my mind about the possibility of, you know, that I was wrong about the book hinting towards an affair. So I'm gonna get to reading it, so that way, you know, you guys that are viewing are like, oh my gosh, quit yakking your jaw and get to reading the book. So here we go. I want to make sure I have my live chat popped up too, though. 2 more seconds. So many screens. Alright, okay. Alright, in 1943, I started the 7th grade in junior high school, where my father was the newly appointed principal. Now remember, in first grade, his father was the newly appointed principal, right? And his promotion was a really big deal because his father got a wooden sign next to the parking spot, he got his own wooden sign and parking spot next to the door that he walked into to get into school, right? So elementary school, his dad's a principal, and now here in 7th grade in the junior high, his dad is the principal. It was there that my life really began, but for the first 10 years, I figured that if it weren't for my name, I wouldn't have anything at all. Alright, remember that. Okay. Then, when I became a teenager, things just got worse. The good part was that I wasn't even smart enough to know that I wasn't very bright until one day my teacher asked, "Forrest Fenn, don't you know anything?" I replied, "Miss Ford, I don't even suspect anything." Then for some strange reason, what I had just said seemed to take on a purpose of its own. It was a primeval thought, but maybe it made me think deeper down. No matter what I lacked or lost, bad grades and all, they couldn't take away my name. Now, he says that he's not even smart enough to know that he's not very bright, right? And for the first 10 years, he figured if it weren't for his name, he wouldn't have anything at all. And he got in this discussion, you know, with his teacher. His teacher says, "Forrest, don't you even know anything?" And he's like, "I don't even suspect anything." And then he gets this idea that pops into his head, right? He's like, "I don't know anything, but here I am in school, and somehow I've managed to make it this far, and if it weren't for my name, I wouldn't have anything at all." So he's implying if it was not for the last name of Fenn, he would not have been successful in school, right? He manages to skate by because his dad is the principal. And he confirms that no matter what I lacked or lost, bad grades and all, they couldn't take away my name. What caused Miss Ford to focus on me in the first place was that I always sat in the back of the room where I thought she couldn't tell whether I was asleep or not. So in my original videos, when I was discussing the possibility of an affair, I thought that was the reason why Miss Ford always focused on him. When he said, "Miss Ford, I don't even suspect anything," and then it clicked with him, I thought it was his aha moment of something going on between Miss Ford and the dad, and that's why Miss Ford had a tendency to focus on Fenn. If you go back and you watch Secrets in the Book, I think you'll have a better understanding of where I was coming from in that specific situation. Okay, what caused Miss Ford to focus on me in the first place was that I always sat in the back of the room where I thought she couldn't tell whether I was asleep or not. My perceived detachment had developed into a cat and mouse match of sorts. So one day, she asked the class a question and called on me to answer. So I'm assuming he's back there, hold on, I'll finish. So one day she asked the class a question and called on me to answer. To everyone's surprise, I answered correctly, and that startled her pretty good. Now remember, he's sitting in the back of the classroom where he thinks Miss Ford can't tell whether he's asleep or not. So he's just hanging out in the back of the classroom, just doing his own thing, not paying attention, and Miss Ford trying to, catch him off guard. "Forrest, what is the answer to blah blah blah?" And he gets it right? And it throws her off, and now she's all pissy, like, "Damn, I thought I had the freaking principal's son for a minute. Gosh darn it!" But he outsmarted me, right? Used his wits and was a fox that dressed like the hound. That startled her pretty good. She said to me with that sideways looking face, "Forrest, were you asleep?" I said, "No, Miss Ford, I was awake." "Well, your eyes were closed," she said. "No, Miss Ford, my eyes were open. It was just my eyelids that were closed." I said that to her as gently as I could and quickly crossed my legs. The snickers around the class did little to belay her anguish, and just for a faint moment, my growing awareness compared the look on her face to the can opener ad I'd seen in a Good Housekeeping magazine. So, when he said the comment, or when he said, "No, Miss Ford, my eyes were open. It was just my eyelids that were closed." Go back to the Secrets in the Book videos, the 2-part series, and you'll come to I'll walk you to what I think it was, but pretty much, he knows what's going on, right? When he said, "Miss Ford, I don't even suspect anything," and when he said that, he's like, "You know what? Now that I say that, I do suspect something. Like, I know exactly what's going on." That's why Miss Ford focused on him, right? And then when he said, "No, Miss Ford, my eyes were open. It was just my eyelids that were closed," he was saying that I am awake, right? Like, I am no longer blind to what's going on. And I you know, I still can read it that way and still see that connection. But really what he's saying is, no, Miss Ford, I was awake. My eyes were open. It was just my eyelids that were closed. He's still saying, like, I'm not blind, right? But he's saying it not about an affair, but to the point where he is not blind to the fact that he is the principal's son and can do pretty much whatever he wants to do and be okay with it, right? And later on in the book, you know, he meets that dumb, ugly sergeant that gave him purpose for the first time, you know, and that was like a brutal awakening for him. Like, oh crap, you know, I'm not going to be able to skate by in this. So he's pretty much saying that yeah, I am fully aware that you can try your best to hold me back, but my dad's the principal. So if you value your job, I suggest you let me skate on by here, okay? And when he says, my growing awareness compared the look on her face to a can opener ad I'd seen in Good Housekeeping magazine. So I'm just imagining this woman that is trying a new can opener, right? And she's just shocked, like I can't believe it works this good, you know? But like a look of like amazement and shock or something. So I'm imagining Miss Ford is like, what the heck, you know? Anyways, I was ahead for now, but I remembered what I'd heard once on the Amos and Andy radio show. Don't make the alligator mad until you've crossed the river. All of the bravery was in my talk, and I knew that sooner or later I was going to get mine. Fortunately, the bell rang about that time, and I was out of there like a cannonball on fire. So, he remembers what he heard on the Amos and Andy radio show about don't make the alligator mad until you've crossed the river. He's using that as a metaphor of saying, like, bro, don't push your luck too much because it's the start of the school year and you still have to make it all the way through 7th grade with this teacher. So don't push it too much, right? Is it laggy? I don't know how to fix that. Hold on. Let me see what I can do. Hold on, you guys. Man, this crap is, you know, pretty darn complicated. It's not too bad. Like, I'm assuming it's because it's live streaming, and once it comes, you're not. I'm definitely not reading too much into it. That's exactly what he's saying. He's saying, I realize that I can get away with what I want to get, or what I want to get away with. And I recognize that now because I'm the principal's son. Don't make the alligator mad until you've crossed the river. Don't piss off your teacher because you still gotta get all the way through 7th grade. Like, is it unbearable or is it like good enough? You know, is it good enough for you guys to watch, or is it just super super annoying and not worth watching? Because I'm looking at everything on my end and it says that it's good. You know, YouTube says my stream health is good. You know, I'm not seeing any issues in OBS. Okay. Go. Alright, cool. So I'm going to keep going then. If it's just not working out for you, I'm sure once the video uploads, it will have finished buffering and all that. You know, and then he says, fortunately the bell rang about that time, and I shot out of there like a cannonball on fire. You know, he threw in his smart comment, hit her with the 1-2 hook, and then he was like, thank God he was able to get out of there before, you know, he backed himself into a corner. Now he says, I secretly love that old lady Ford, and I say old because she had to be at least 40. She was barely pretty, but hadn't yet gone to seed, and I suspected that she had a lot of woman left in her. You know, I always read that as like a, you know, Forrest crushing on her type thing. And, you know, if you kind of think about it, he is in 7th grade, right? And he's saying, like, you know, he's having those normal, like, 7th grade boy thoughts or whatever. But he's saying, like, she was barely pretty, right? So she was pretty enough and hadn't yet gone to seed. So she hasn't aged quite yet. You know, she's got to be at least 40, but hey, she still looks like decently young. She hasn't, you know, her looks haven't left her quite yet. And that he suspected she has a whole lot of woman left in her. So he's pretty much looking at her in like a, you know, a devious manner, I guess, if you would say that. He says her problem was that she kept trying to teach me Spanish by talking Spanish all the time. Now, I'm assuming she's not trying to teach him Spanish by talking Spanish all the time. I'm assuming she's cussing him out all the time in Spanish, right? You know, anybody that, you know, has a Hispanic friend or whatever knows what I'm talking about when they get pissed off. Just, you know. And he says, I never figured out that technique. Yeah, it's because you weren't supposed to know what she was saying. That's the way I read it anyways. And then 1940s is called. Alright, I never figured out that technique. Besides, other important things were building up in my mind. Alright, so again, he's cluing us in. Here's that key word again, important, right? So he's telling us, somewhere around here, you need to start really paying attention to what I'm about to say, right? What important things were starting to build up in his mind. And that's what we have to start looking for. I had so many thoughts, I could hardly keep them in my mouth. So when some of them got out one cloudy day, Miss Ford grabbed my arm in a huff and marched me down to my father's office. I had seen her mad before, but not like this. She wouldn't look at me, but I could see it in her face. I'm assuming she's probably talking Spanish right now too. I always thought that if you left things alone, maybe they'd go away, but not this time. I knew I was about to enter personality rehab. Her mouth was moving in fast cadence with her choppy steps, and it was obvious that rage had found a home. So at this point, Forrest is like, bro, you done did it this time, right? Like, usually he might be able to be sly and talk his way out of it with Miss Ford and you know, just kind of use some smooth talk, or the bell rings just in time and he can get out of there or whatever. But at this point, he's like, oh my gosh, she won't even look at me. Look how fast she's walking. Her mouth is moving so damn fast in a language that I don't even understand. Like, I'm about to get my personality worked over. My dad was sitting at his desk doing something very important. Again, doing something very important. Okay? When she blurted out, Mr. Fenn, your son called me an old bat. Well, my education was fast approaching graduation with that one. He looked a little corroded and suggested that Miss Ford leave and please close the door behind you. About that time, my father gave me a look. And I mean really a look. Okay? So this is what I'm saying. We have 2 hints towards important, right? We have 2 mentionings of important. And right now, his dad's giving him a look. And he means really a look. He even italicized really, right? So that means that we really need to look over, right? Just like Forrest says, you know, whenever my dad talked, I listened. You know, my father was paying my bills, so I had to listen to him. You know, stuff like that. He says, I was sure a window pane somewhere in Mississippi was about to break. Now that, I think, is important. I haven't been able to quite figure that one out, but I really think that that comment right there, something about that comment has always stood out to me. I was sure a window pane somewhere in Mississippi was about to break. Just as he started to lean into some pretty strong adjectives, I quickly held up my hand and interrupted. Father, I said, her story isn't exactly right. What I said was, my father says you're an old bat. Alright, okay. I I don't know if I ever read the first part. I think I stopped when I reached very important. When she says, "Mr. Fenn, your son called me an old bat." Okay, yeah, I did. All right, so he's saying, Dad, look, I didn't call her that. Technically, you did. I was just letting her know what you had said. Now, the principal is like one of my faculty members or one of my teachers that I'm the appointed principal over now knows my legitimate thoughts about her. Hold on a second. My dog is going to drive me nuts. Give me 2 seconds here. All right, now how we looking? Good to go? I think it should be good. I don't know why it did that. Hold on. Should be good. Should be good to go. Start again from the dog issue. All right, so you can hear me now, I'm assuming? So what's the last thing that you guys heard me read? Let me go back and see. All right. All right, so you guys heard me say father. I said her story isn't exactly right. What I said is my father says you're an old bat. All right, pretty much the only thing that I said when I got back, I seen a... Jeez, oh Pete's, man. All right, how about now? Good to go? Should be good. Is that a test? I feel like that should be loud enough. And nothing. I'm losing streams right now as we're talking. All right, sound is better. Okay. So pretty much when I got back from getting the dog, I had looked up and seen that Hush Whisperer had said that people only talk about all the streams and videos are talking about everything but the poem. You know, and I went on this rant about how, you know, everything is the same where warm water's hot. It has to be a hot spring, or where a hot spring meets the cold water, or it's got to be, you know, blah blah blah. Like everything's exactly the same. It's the same canyon down. It's the same argument of not far but too far to walk. You know, just stuff like that. It's the same what the home of Brown means. Speaking of the home of Brown, if Forrest told us that the clues in the poem aren't related to any structure, then can the home of Brown actually be a home? Right? And I think that's a fair question. Now that's if you're considering the fact that structure could mean a building, right? Like a hardened structure. But Forrest said, if you have any confusion on the word structure, Google it. So I would say all of you guys read what the word, or Google the word structure and look at every possible definition, right? And then compare that to the definition of simplify, right? And then, you know, just stuff like that. So sure, I don't talk about the poem. I do have some videos where I talk about the poem and my interpretation of it and whatnot. But my goal here is to not be talking about the exact same stuff. You know, what warm water is, what canyon down is. My goal here is to figure out what Forrest believes that stuff is. And the only way that we could do that is by doing the exact thing that Forrest told us to do, right? Read the book, then read the poem over and over and over, then go back and read the book slowly, looking for anything that stands out. Well, we all know the poem. We've all read it over and over and over, right? We all have the poem freaking memorized. So that's why I'm making this series of going back and reading the book slowly, and for us trying to figure out a place, or trying to figure out these things that stands out. You know, one of the people commented, they said, I've never paid attention to the word important, right? Why is it in this book so much? Here, I'll tell you how many, no I won't because I don't have my phone on me, but, you know, I was going to look up exactly how many times the word important is in the book, because it's a crap ton, okay? But anyways, I didn't read any part of the story, but pretty much Forrest is saying, like, Dad, your story, or her story isn't exactly true. Like, I didn't call her that. I told her that you had called her that. And now the principal is like, crap. You know, I opened my mouth a little bit more than I should have. Now the principal, or now one of the teachers appointed under me, you know, knows these thoughts and stuff like that. And this is where they have a moment. Now within this moment that they're having, we need to give it a look, right? And I mean really a look, according to Forrest, because it's important, which is according to Forrest. He says, he slowed to a stop as my words began to soak in, and I could see his mood changing right there in front of me. He remembered when she'd called in sick one morning, and he had to leave the breakfast table to find a substitute, and the telephone was clear down at the end of the house. He really hated that, especially since the biscuits and gravy were hot on his plate. Now again, this tied into, you know, my whole affair belief is like, Forrest's dad gets a phone call by Mrs. Ford, and he's like, dang it, now I gotta take this phone call all the way at the end of the house, you know, where nobody can hear me on the phone. Especially the way that Forrest says it. He remembered when she'd called in sick one morning, and he had to leave the breakfast table to find a substitute, and the telephone was clear down at the end of the house. He really hated that, especially since the biscuits and gravy were hot on his plate. And then we get into it even more. Now his demeanor was one of deep compassion and understanding. He rested on that for a moment. Then he sat down, twisted in his chair, and took my hand. Okay, son, what have we learned from all this? Well, I didn't have a clue about what we'd learned, but was praying thanks to Thor because he was holding my hand and smiling. My father, I mean. Again, here we are with the I mean. Who else would he be referring to? Thor? You know, obviously Thor is not praying or holding his hand while he's praying. So, again, we have something that Forrest is telling us to really look into by using, or he's saying to really give it a look. And he's also telling us that it's important. And then he's telling us that his demeanor, he says that his mood changed right in front of him. So the mood changed right in front of him. Now his demeanor was one of deep compassion and understanding, right? Pretty much telling us that we need to understand the message that's being conveyed right here, or we need to understand something that's being conveyed right here. He rested on that for a moment. Then he sat down, twisted in his chair, and took my hand. Okay, son, what have we learned from all this? Forrest is asking us, you know, the same thing. He's telling a story like his story, but he's also doing it in a way that can ask us what we've learned from this, right? He's saying understanding and learned, really a look, important, and all these things that he's saying are right here all together. Then he says, well, I didn't have a clue, right? I didn't have a clue about what we'd learned, but was praying thanks to Thor because he was holding my hand and smiling. My father, I mean. Now, Thor, right? A mythological god. It's the thunder god. I'll just go ahead and read it to you guys, right? Because he didn't have a clue, but he was praying thanks to Thor. And it's important, and we need to give it a look, and he means really a look, and it's important, and we need to understand it and know what we learned from it. Okay, so from the Germanic mythology, another thing, you read the poem, if you look up each and every one of the words in the poem, or for the most part, the majority of these words have been derived from a Germanic meaning. And now he's mentioning, you know, this Germanic god, if you will. I don't necessarily know if it's the same as, okay, Norse. All right, it says it right there. Is a hammer-wielding god. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to first grade. My father was a teacher at Lanier School when I started first grade, and after a couple years, he became the principal. His promotion was a really big deal, right? It's a really big deal, meaning what I'm about to say is a really big deal because he got his own parking spot in front near the window where he went in. I remember standing there while he hammered the wooden sign into the ground, right? Next thing you know, he's praying thanks to Thor. Thor being the hammer-wielding god associated with thunder, lightning, storms, oak trees, strength, and the protection of mankind, right? Doesn't Forrest talk about the future of mankind? Doesn't he talk about, you know, sitting beneath an old oak tree or an old pine tree and just going to rest right there? Doesn't he specifically talk about rain and lightning and thunder and now even his horse? His horse's name was Lightning. So I would be very surprised if this doesn't all have a connection. All right, then he says, my father, I mean. Everywhere that he says, I mean, it's to grab your attention. You know why people say, you know what I mean? It's not because, it's not just to continuously say, you know what I mean, or you know what I'm saying. It's because that person that's saying it, probably out of habit, right? It just ended up turning into a crutch word, if you will. Like if I'm explaining this book to you, and then at the end I say, you know what I'm saying, It's sure it turned into a habit, but they're saying it because they really want you to know what they're saying or to know what they mean, right? Some people use that way too much, and Forrest is one of them, but I'm saying that he's doing that to grab our attention, to make sure before we continue on, we go back and we figure out the thing that Forrest Fenn was saying, pretty much, you know what I mean to. Yeah, he does admit that, but he only admitted it because it ended up being brought up to him. Are you talking about for the one in important literature? All right, I'm going to continue on. Forrest's dad says, what we've learned is that you should always tell the truth, but you should not always tell all of the truth. Again, this has a connection with Thor. It'll take too long for me to look into it. But if you start doing some research on Thor, not on the Hint of Riches, but on Thor the god, then you'll end up coming across that same little should not always tell all of the truth type thing. Boy, oh boy, those 5 minutes were better than all the diplomas in Texas. I had just learned about fear, hate, ethics, dread, moralities, passion, honesties, subterfuge, truth, and a bunch of other things I can't even remember anymore. Again, all those things that he just listed off has a connection with the story of Thor and then the people that he has rivaled against and whatnot. I prayed for D's in all my classes, but no one ever listened. Right, so meaning he got F's in all of his classes, right? And again, if nobody listened to Forrest, if his prayers weren't answered, right, and he didn't get D's, then that means the only thing that he got was F's, right? But if he got F's, he wouldn't have graduated school. Meaning that if it wasn't for his name, he wouldn't have anything at all. So even though he didn't get the D's that he prayed for and he only got F's, he somehow managed to, get right through school. So I decided to just do things my own way and to heck with what people thought. If they weren't paying my bills, I didn't have to listen to them. Unless they were saying something that I wanted to hear, of course. My father was paying my bills, so I had to listen to him. He's telling us every time that he makes a mention of his dad saying something to listen to it. Anyway, I figured my failing classroom grades were more than offset by my valedictorian marks in Savvy 101 and Street Smarts 102. He's saying, like, I might not have the good grades, but I have an imagination, which I believe is more important than knowledge. I'm resourceful as hell. I'm a smooth talking son of a gun, and I managed to work my way through any problem that comes across, The greater part of knowledge, my father once told me, the greater part of knowledge is knowing those things not worthy of knowing. Now he says, now why would he tell me something like that? He just said it right out. Was he trying to justify my lack of ability to take a test? Maybe he was thinking that if I could just somehow get by in life, I'd be way ahead. Again, every time he's asking us a question, it's because he's questioning us to find an answer, right? And he says, he just said it right out. Forrest is doing the same thing to us. It went from a completely different story, or not different story, but we were beyond the point of talking about his dad, and he's talking about, how his failing grades, but it's okay because he's savvy and blah, blah, blah. And then boom, there's a comment by his father. The same father that he just said whenever his father talks, he has to listen. And he's telling us that we have to listen when his dad says something. Now, the greater part of knowledge is knowing those things not worthy of knowing. Now, I always thought that that meant like secret knowledge, right? Like knowing the stuff that really doesn't matter knowing, right? And that's the greater part of knowledge. But that's not what he's saying, I don't think. He's saying the greater part of knowledge is knowing those things not worthy of knowing. When he's saying not worthy, he's saying that you're not worthy. The greater part of knowledge is knowing those things that you're not worthy of knowing. Implying like this is above your pay grade, pretty much, right? Like you are not worthy of knowing this information. And isn't that the same information that everybody seeks out, right? The stuff that you're not supposed to know. I know I do that. So he's saying, you know, you gotta look for that stuff that's hard to get the answers to. And right after that, he says, why did he go ahead and say something like that? You know, why did he ask me that? Now, why would he tell me something like that? He just said it right out. Now, in order for us to give the answer to why would he tell me something like that, first we have to understand the answer to what exactly that quote means. And I believe that quote is, you know, talking about the things that you're not worthy of knowing. You know, not the knowledge isn't worthy, but it's you're unworthy of knowing. Not you guys, the audience, but you in general, people. Then he says, one day my father gave me a spanking at school for running across some stupid desks. Then that night he gave me a spanking at home because I got a spanking at school. The more I thought about that, the more I felt put upon. When I explained to him that I'd been double jeopardized, he told me that those things didn't count in a dictatorship. That's when I first started to mistrust governments. I'm assuming this has an important element to it. He says, it was easy to justify the time I spent in Spanish class looking out of the big window that was adjacent to my desk. It was on the second floor and a beautiful old iron slide-down fire escape was just outside that window. Again, this is probably our fourth mention of window. And I believe that he's describing a scene to us. Well, he is describing a scene. That's dumb to say. But I believe he's describing a separate scene from the scene that he's describing in the book. Right? So, justify the time I spent in Spanish class. So, if we imagine that there's like a Spanish mountain or something like that. Right? Looking out of the big window that was adjacent to the desk. So, if we're on top of, you know, if we're imagining, you know, Spanish mountain or whatever, then, and we're looking adjacent to it, you know, maybe there's one of those little notches in the next range or something like that, right? And then it was on the second floor, right? So we started off at first grade. Crap, I made a video yesterday and I didn't upload it. But it pretty much was saying that, you know, when he's talking about first grade and about the sign and whatnot, I was talking about how he could possibly be describing the elevation, right? So right there at the first grade, right, or at the lowest elevation, or at the base of our first grade, right, heading to wherever we're going, there's a wooden sign there, and it's easy to notice because nothing else has wooden signs, if that makes sense. And what else did I say about it? Anyways, but now he's talking about the second floor, right? And the beautiful old iron slide down fire escape. So you could call it iron slide maybe, or something like that. That was just outside that window. So he could be painting a different scene than the one that he's trying to depict here, right? This school right here, if anybody can find it, if you could send me the link, that'd be great, because I looked all over and I cannot find a picture of that school right there. I mean, I shouldn't say I looked all over. I really didn't look that hard, but I legitimately attempted to find it for a decent little bit. It was on the second floor, and a beautiful old iron slide down fire escape was just outside that window. When the sun was out, The smell of freedom was more than I could resist. So on occasion, when Miss Ford was writing Spanish words on the blackboard, I'd quickly slip through the window and down and away. I was proud to have thought of that idea all by myself. All right, so obviously he used his imagination to come up with that idea, since ideas are linked to imagination. All right. I remember the exhilarating feeling that there was probably a lot more ideas out there that were just as good as that one. Fortunately, I was the only one in the class who knew that trick. The sliding, I mean. Here we go again, right? Something about the trick, right? Escaping out the window, and he does the same thing when he goes, you know, when in the Gypsy Magic chapter, and you know, there's a whole lot of him escaping out of a window, and a whole lot of you know, I'm sure a window was about to break. You know, I'm sure a window pane somewhere in Mississippi was about to break. Something about window is significant, right? So yeah, fortunately, I was the only one in the class that knew that trick, the sliding, I mean. And even though that rusty old iron thing marked the tail of my britches pretty good with a heavy brown color, it was worth it. So is he saying, is that something that we're going to have to do to get to the treasure? Is not far but too far to walk actually sliding? And even though it's going to mark the tail of our britches with a heavy brown color, it's going to be worth it because we found the chest. You know, and he says, I was proud to have thought of that idea all by myself. I remember the exhilarating feeling that there were probably a lot more ideas out there that were just as good as that one. I remember he always had more important ideas popping in and out of his head, right? And now he's telling us that it will be worth it. So is he describing the routes that you have to take to get to the chest? Okay. Everyone who walked behind me on the way to the next class knew what I'd done. People were beginning to notice me. This always cracked me up, right? Because everybody's noticing him, not because they knew that he had slid down the fire escape, but because they thought that he crapped his pants, right? He's walking through the hall, and everybody's noticing him because he has this big brown stain on his pants, right? And this isn't the first time that he mentions having brown pants, okay? So remember, when I talked about the possibility of him going to a tourist area, right? And he's paying this guy, the guy that's making him feel bad about being elderly, right? Embarrassing him because of like the senior citizen discount, and how he just stood there making his $6.50 an hour. Is he talking about some place, right? Some place that we're gonna go once we figure out the poem, and once we get there, we have to slide down this brown fire escape, or not fire escape, but slide down this brown, you know, creek or whatever, right? It's not far, but it's too far to walk, because not far but too far to walk doesn't make much sense at all, right? Not far means short or near or close, right? Too far to walk, it's like saying it's close but you can't walk. That's the way I read it, right? It's close but you physically can't walk. Now, is it physically you can't walk because it's so far away? If it's so far away, then why is it not far, right? Or is he saying you physically cannot walk to it, right? Like, you're up here and it's down here, right? If we're taking into consideration the waterfall idea, right? Here's the where we're stopping, you know, where warm water's halt and take it in the canyon down, and here's this not far but too far to walk or whatever, and here it is, right? And you have to like physically go walk down and around or whatever to get down here. Or so like too far to walk means you can't walk it, right? Which that would make sense. But could he be implying a slide, right? And and it's going to mark the tail of our britches with a heavy brown color, but it's going to be worth it. Why would it be worth it? Right? Your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. So, and he talks about mud all the time. Are we possibly talking about like a muddy slide type situation? And what really kind of reassures it is right here. Right here, when we get to it, he talks about everyone who walked behind him on the way to the next class knew what he'd done. Now remember, they think that he all crapped his pants. So if we're at a tourist destination or whatever, or somewhere that there's a lot of people, right, and we just went down, we just found the slide, right, and we slide down, and we like get up, right, we don't know that the chest is there, we're confident, right, we moved with confidence, but of course we don't know that we solved the first clue until we don't know if we had the correct first clue unless we found the chest. So we like get up from the slide or whatever, and we like look back and we're like, oh man, what the heck, you know? But then like down there we see the blaze and we're like, oh, you know, and we go and we get the chest and we're jumping up with joy or whatever. We go back, we head back up to the top, and in order to get to our car, we have to pass the amount of people that are likely to be there. And all these people are staring at you because they think that you shit your pants. But it would be worth it. That's what Fenn is saying, I'm pretty sure. I know that was a pretty extravagant rant right there. And he says, people were beginning to notice me. To miss Ford out the window meant out of sight where I couldn't cause her any trouble. She was going to flunk me anyway, so what difference did it make? I was beginning to learn where the edges were. Now, where are these aberrations at? That Forrest tells us that these aberrations live out on the edges somewhere. So is he hinting that same thing? I'm telling you, Forrest is describing the scenery at this location, right? At the location. He's describing his path to get there. He's describing exactly how he hid the chest. We haven't gotten there yet, and once we get there, I don't know if I'm necessarily willing to talk about it. I mean, I will to a certain extent, but I mean, not a whole lot, right? That slide idea just kind of like stood out to me just right now while I was reading it. I'd never caught that before. So maybe that's why Forrest says read the poem slowly or whatever. But is that the type of stuff that we're looking for? I was beginning to learn where the edges were right now, right? I just began to learn what Forrest was trying to do or whatever, right? Could be a possibility. And later in life, it would come to me that one of the greatest mistakes of human endeavor has been the belief that wealth and fame could always equate with intelligence, right? So his biggest belief was the fact that if you were intelligent or if you were famous and wealthy, it automatically meant that you were intelligent, right? That's one of mistakes of the greatest mistakes of human endeavors, right? And what's an endeavor? If we look back to the first video of the series that I did, it's a goal, right? It's the destination of a crap. Let me look it up one more time just so I don't jack it all up. Okay. Endeavor. To try hard to achieve something, to attempt to achieve a goal, and an enterprise or undertaking. So one of the greatest mistakes of human undertaking or human goals has been the belief, you know, and sorry, you're wrong. All right, man, that's fine. I'll continue to say that I'm pretty sure every single person in this chase is wrong, including me, and I will continue to think so until somebody finds the treasure. I don't believe that I'm right. I don't believe that I'm wrong. I believe that Forrest is giving us little descriptions in this book of exactly how he did it, right? And it's so minute and so like snuck in there that especially if I pointed out the hiding of how he hid the treasure, that would be the biggest, like, holy crap, like, now I need to go back and read this book. And I didn't notice it until I was reading the book to my father-in-law, right? Because I had something else figured out, you know, and I'm going through and I'm like, see, listen to this. And I go through and I read it and then I'm like, boom, now right here. And I'm reading some stuff. And then everything that he had just said, oh, okay. My bad then. Then I read something. I was like, oh my God. Like, he just described exactly how he hid the treasure. He just described exactly the scenery of where he hid the treasure. Right? So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But that's where I'm gonna have to leave off for right now. My family just pulled in, so series number 5 will probably cover Bessie and me and my Spanish toy factory. Right, those are pretty short, so we might actually be able to get me in the middle into, and then yeah, that's what we'll focus on. So I'm gonna go back through and I'm gonna read, see if anybody commented anything. I've said too much. Alright, I'm just looking if there's any at Rodney Greenways or whatever. If you did write something to me in here and I don't catch it, it's right there in the book. I don't know what you're referring to. I know there's a Spanish mountain. I was just using that as an example. But if you commented something towards me and I don't catch it, it's just because of, like, you have to use the actual tag, otherwise it doesn't highlight. Yeah, and to Michael, my bad, man. I thought you were talking to me when I was reading. Cultural Activity Center in Temple, Texas. Alright, I'll take a look at it. And then if you came to the chat, or if you came to the stream late, if you could do me a favor, and once this video is uploaded, listen to the first 5 minutes. I explained something about my channel and the input that I'm hoping to get from you guys. So I'm sure it'll be uploaded, you know, within an hour. If you guys go back, listen to that quick 5 minutes so you can have a good grasp of what I'm trying to do, and then, you know, leave me your comments or suggestions. I would really appreciate it. If you are one of the 65% of viewers that have not subscribed yet, I don't know why I say it like that every time. I just look at it as like a negative number. I'm like, damn, 65% of people haven't subscribed but are hanging out watching. But if you're one of those people, you know, please subscribe, comment, like, shoot me an email, fenntreasurethoughts@gmail.com. If you are one of the people that would like to, you know, make a contribution or whatever, the link will be down into the bottom. But really all I ask is for your donations so that this channel or not donations, your subscribe, so that way the channel can grow, and then everything will kind of work itself out in the end anyways. Hopefully these products and stuff that I'm producing for you are a little bit better than the old, you know, just recording stuff from my phone, and makes you want to be here watching a little bit more. Like the average person only watches like 20 minutes anyways, but it's always the same people that stick around the whole time, and you guys are the ones that I'm targeting anyways. You know, for the people that watch me for the whole hour, how can I make this better for you guys? You know, and that's my goal. But I'm going to hop off again one more time. I appreciate the 50 plus subscribers in the last, you know, 28 days. You know, I'm shooting a goal, you know, shooting for 500. If I could get to 500 subscribers, you know, before May, because at that point I'll have been, you know, 1 year as a YouTube channel. Like, granted, it's not blown up by any means, but still, to start a channel and get subscribers is pretty freaking hard. especially with such a small niche community that we are. It's not really getting a lot of people's attention. So 500 is my goal. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. And other than that, I'm going to head off, and I'll talk to you guys later when we do the part 5. All right, take it easy.